Do you have a burning creative passion? Have you always wanted to express that to the world but didn't know how or when to start? If so, man, I got a treat for y'all today on this episode. So yeah, welcome in to the AU show. It's your boy Adi, your go-to source for golden gems. Today I have a very special guest. He comes to us from the greatest city in the world, the Big Apple, originally from Japan, and he's a thriving artist and professional in New York. So Shibu, welcome to the show, my brother.
Thank you, Adi. I'm happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. This has been a long time coming, so I'm glad we finally here and doing it. So, dude, I always love to start these conversations just with the throwback, like how it all began. So, man, I gotta ask, Shibu, as a kid growing up, bro, were you the type where you were just like reckless, going to the principal's office all the time, or were you the shy one that sat in the back of the class, just observed everything, or were you in between? I guess where on the spectrum did you fall?
I was definitely the shy kid growing up. I was a very shy, curious kid. I was like the shy kid who would hang out with people who were more reckless and stuff like that. But somehow I would be the one getting detention or getting in trouble because I would be the one getting caught, you know? That was just who I was. I was always a goofball, but I was very shy. So very introverted as a kid, you know, but I was very curious. I've always been a people lover. So it's kind of a paradox because I was shy, but I wanted to break out of my shell and, you know, just be surrounded by people. Right? So I realized later on I'm actually very extroverted because I get energy from being around people. It just took me a while to get out of that shell, but as a kid, I was like very timid growing up in Japan.
Absolutely, man. I love to see, that's how we talk about growth, right? It's like it's changing from, evolving from how you were to where you are now. But I gotta ask, I think, dude, I can only imagine. Like, when people talk about Japan's a place to visit, I love Tokyo Drift from Fast and Furious, but you grew up there, as in, like, you spent a good amount of your childhood, somewhere else that wasn't America, it wasn't India. So talk to me about what were those dynamics, man, especially being as a Tamil kid. Did you feel like, were there other Tamil folks there? Were you the only one? I guess, what was it like adapting and just growing up somewhere else?
Yeah, so being a South Indian kid, Tamil, in Japan was pretty crazy because there's not a lot of people that look like me or even spoke the same language as me, right? So there were Indians in my school, but the Tamil community was like a subset of that. It was mostly North Indian people speaking Hindi, and so I didn't really know where to fit in. I was also trying to assimilate into the Japanese culture. Luckily, I went to an international school, so it allowed for expats and people from Korea, people from America, people from all over the world, Europe even, to send their kids to the school that I went to. But growing up, Tamil was definitely pretty confusing, because I heard Tamil at home, but I wouldn't hear it too much in school. We got taught in English, and then I would hear Japanese in the streets on the way to school and to and from back. So it was very confusing. It was three cultures kind of gnawing at me and trying to etch itself into who I was, right? So it was definitely culturally confusing. I always say I'm to this day, a culturally confused artist. But I feel like that's a good thing now, looking back, because it made me who I am. Kind of blended me into like a unique persona.
Absolutely. I think it's important to have layers, and I think the fact that you got exposure to, three cultures as a kid is awesome. I think there's some folks, I think circumstantially, like, they will spend their entire lives in a small town and they don't even know what's in the other cities, let alone across the world. So I think that's great. Dealing with these three cultures, how important was it instilled in you as a kid, like, to have this identity of being Tamil? And did you feel like it was a challenge to reinforce that? Like, as you mentioned, like, you're dealing with folks who are similar, but they're not Tamil at school, and you're also, like, trying to learn English, and you obviously want to be accepted by, like, your fellow students. So what was that, like, exercise like for you throughout the years?
Man, so I had pockets of the Tamil culture at home, right? We didn't even have Hindu temples that we could go to on Sundays. We had to go to the jinjas, or the local Japanese shrines. That's where my family took me, and they worshipped whatever deity that was there. But I'm sure my parents were envisioning Ganesh and Vishnu and Lakshmi and all those gods, right, that we're used to praying for. But there was only pockets of that, the Tamil culture that I had in my house. Luckily, because we were in Japan, it's not too far from India. I was able to visit India every summer. That's when I really got reconnected to my roots, right? I would spend the entire summer vacation with my grandparents and my uncles and aunts in my hometown of Tuticorin and also Chennai. I would oscillate between those two cities. That's when I really got engulfed into my original home, the mother. That was important for me because it kept me grounded, even though I was living in such an advanced country like Japan, right? And getting a very supremely advanced education in an international school teaching English in Japan. It was very jarring, right, for me seeing like India in the 90s, like Tamil Nadu in the 90s, and then going to Japan, which is like a far one of the most advanced countries in the world, if not the most advanced, right? So it was very jarring to see, that kind of juxtaposition. And this is way before I was introduced to America, right? So for me, it was between India and Japan. The Tamil culture itself, that was where I got everything. Like those summer vacations when I visited, that's when I got to go to the actual mandir, actual temples, eat actual homemade Indian food like adirasam and all those little sweets like my patis made. But it was hard, man. It was definitely hard because, like I said, majority of the year I was in a totally different type of environment. That was like the extent of the Tamil cultures that I got growing up.
Absolutely. And I know one thing that, folks who grow up away from their motherland struggle with is like, that you're lost because you're not embraced by folks when you go back home because, you're not really like us. You didn't grow up here. You usually stereotypically don't speak the language as fluent. And when you go back to where you currently live, you're like, dang, I'm not cultured enough to where I fit in there, but I'm also not cool enough, to be embraced by the locals here. So it's like, yeah, I really just don't fit in anywhere. So I guess what was that aspect of like navigating that? Because I know that's a challenge. And obviously as a kid, more than any time in your life, you want to feel accepted and embraced.
Yeah, man. So, like I said, right, going and oscillating between those two countries was definitely a challenge because it really felt like there was a magnifying glass on all of my flaws as both an Indian, Tamil Indian kid, and also a Japanese kid trying to get an American education. So, it felt like in either way, I was kind of failing. I was failing at being Tamil because I didn't speak Tamil enough. I didn't speak fluently, anywhere near fluently. It was all broken up. So, it was kind of a tough time dealing with the fact that I wasn't Tamil enough for my family. People ridiculed me all the time just with the broken Tamil stuff, and say that I wasn't, enrooted in my culture enough. Even though that wasn't really my fault because it wasn't my fault. My decision to go to Japan or to grow up in Japan, and then in Japan it was like also a challenge because I wasn't Japanese enough for the culture. Definitely didn't look the part. People would definitely look a little differently at me, literally because I looked nothing like them. And I didn't, I was still kind of learning English. I had an accent and everything. So those things were definitely challenging, man. Those things really made me feel like I didn't really belong, like in either culture. I guess America came along later on in my life, and that kind of helped me kind of mold into those things a little better and be more accepting of, who I was, as opposed to trying to fit in into something that I was trying too hard to fit into.
I really appreciate that sentiment, man. And I gotta ask, I think as a Tamil kid growing up, what was like your fondest first memory? Like whether it's like, the first Tamil movie you saw, the first taste of, Tamil culture, what was that stood out with you?
Bro, so like when we were in Japan, we would have these video cassettes that we'd bring from India each year. And
Yeah.
that was the way I watched all the Tamil movies. So as a kid, bro, like my mom, she would play me all these Rajini movies, right? And just singing along to the Rajini songs as a kid, I absolutely loved. That was like my favorite thing to do, right? I would be like singing it in the shower. I'd be singing it on the way to school, and no other kids would have any idea what I'm like singing, right? And like the Orban Orban Mudalali song, the song in Muthu, that was like my childhood anthem, bro. Like I used to sing that song religiously. So just like seeing this like larger than life figure Rajini come onto the screen, and then I love doing that, and I love talking about it back when I went to India in those summer vacations, right? Then they would validate my fandom because then they would be like, yeah, he's huge. He's like the big superstar right now, Then me like trying to pose like him. Those are like my fun, like a first like distinct memories I have being a Tamil kid because I felt like I like watching Rajini in those movies and like singing along those songs kind of made me embrace being Tamil to like another level.
I relate 1000%, man. I think if you'd ask my family, I made them watch like Buddy Up like a million times. That was my ish back then, still is. I love that. And I think too, with that, right, balancing, these three different cultures, embracing your roots, like then moving now from Japan to US, like what do you think was the expectation, and like what were your interests in terms of like when people asked you what do you want to be when you grew up, like what was that original, let's say 10-year-old answer that Shibu would give to folks?
Yeah, so to the last part, right? What I wanted to be when I grow up, right? It's very interesting. Apparently, I don't remember too much of this, but I can understand like certain family members have told me this. Apparently, when I was like around 10 years old, I wanted to be in the restaurant business. And like some of my favorite memories in Japan, or even going back to India, was going to restaurants and eating out, dining out with the family, right? Because I would see so many other families, and I would see other people like congregating, and that's when I realized I just love being around the people, right? So my like passion for being in a room full of people doing their thing, being in a lively atmosphere, that was what stemmed from my desire to be in restaurant business. Because everyone in a restaurant, for better or worse, they're happy. They're going out, they're spending money to eat food that they want to eat, that they're enjoying eating, right? So that I kind of liked seeing that. And so that was my first, that's what I wanted to do when someone asked me what I want to be when I grow up. Eventually, I kind of grew out of that phase. That was a childhood me, right? But I had no aspirations to be an artist or anything like that at that time yet. I was just like, nah, I just want to make it into the restaurant business. And then later, my parents they got into the typical, oh, you got to be a doctor or you got to be engineer side of things, right? So they instilled that in me like as I grew a little older.
Totally not. I think, double culture, those are the two paths. I think the third one is now maybe it's starting to get more accepted as lawyer, but if you're not in the spectrum of those three, Houston, you have a problem, in some capacities. So I totally relate. But yeah, I know you mentioned that you didn't really see yourself producing music at that time. But were there any inklings, like, for example, do you like to draw? Like, were there any sort of creative interests that really resonated with you at that age where you're like, I like doing this more than, like, like doing like sports or something else after school or even in school, where there like was art a subject that you really was drawn to?
So as a kid, I never thought I would want to be an artist, an actual artist full time. But I would always be singing a lot more than most of the kids in class. I would always be singing more. I would always be like, but at the same time, I was a very shy kid, right? So I wasn't like going out of my way to pursue, choir or like, singing lessons, or I was still shy. But I was always singing. I was always singing more songs than the average kid, whether it was like the Reggie songs or whether it was the J-pop, Japanese pop songs I was listening to, or even like, Backstreet Boys or whoever was popping at, over Japanese radio. So that was the first sign that I wanted to be in the music industry, even though I didn't know it yet. Then eventually in high school, that's when I really started having a huge passion for film. I started getting into movies a lot. One of my boys, Michael, shout out to Michael Petruccio. He is the one who really got me into film. He was the original film buff in our class, and in high school he put me onto all the Quentin Tarantino movies and Martin Scorsese's films and the Coen Brothers movies, and I'm like, this is awesome. This is like something I want to be involved in somehow. And eventually, we had a film class in junior high school. That's when I, for the first time, envisioned myself in the director's seat and in front of the camera as an actor. And I'm like, you know what? I just want to be an artist, man. I want to be obviously a singer in some capacity or like a rapper. And I also want to be like a movie maker, because I see the magic behind the film. I've seen that from since I was watching Resident movies when I was like a year old, right? But then now I want to be part of that. I want to create that for other people. That's around junior high after that film class when we had to make our own film. That's when it really kind of had that light bulb moment, that I wanted to be an artist. That's how it evolved into that.
Very cool. So we expect the Shibu Spielberg, iteration soon enough.
Of course, of course.
That's awesome. And I think with that, what was like the first type of film or production that you ended up working on during junior middle or junior high?
So we made this film for our class where it was like a crime drama, and at the time there was this film that heavily inspired us called The Departed. It's a classic Martin Scorsese's movie, DiCaprio, Mark Wahlberg. That movie, we were fresh off of watching that film, right? We were like, let's make a movie just like that. To some parents, it was controversial because there was like so many depth in that like short film we made. But it was like a short film called Nocturnal Sun, right? And I played a villain in the movie. I played the bad guy. Bro, I had so much fun diving into like that villain role. And a lot of people gave me a lot of props, like a lot of parents. It was funny. They were like, okay, it's a little too much violence for my taste for high school kids, but your acting, Shibu, was awesome. I really believe you were like an actual piece of shit guy, Yo, I'll take those props, man. And that kind of gave me the confidence to just experiment as an artist, not just as an actor, but as an artist. So I'm like, man, I want to be in all types of facets in cinema. That was one of the things that gave me the confidence to even have that thought in my head that I could be an artist.
I love it, man. I think it's great. It's funny. I think only when you look back, you see how all the dots start to connect. So I'm enjoying this, man, because I mean, I've known Shibu for a little bit. I didn't even know he was director aspiration, so this is great. So with that, cool, man. So, let's fast forward from junior high to Shibu's an adult. You're a thriving professional, or I think somewhere along the lines, right? Like you decided to make that decision, like, hey, I want to start to put out music. So what was that moment for you where you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to just drop this first. I'm going to have a vision for a project. I'm going to work on it, and then I'm going to release it. So talk to me about that.
Bro, I mean, it's not as simple as that, right? It took me so long, high school, post that time period, throughout college, and then after college as a professional. That whole time period, it's kind of a blur in which I actually made the decision to do that because it took me so long just to get the confidence within myself, just to get the internal confidence, right? Forget all the external validations that I wanted from my family, from my parents, from my peers, even my friends. Before that, I don't even think I convinced myself that this is something that I want to do or this is something that I could see myself doing, right? So college, and like I say, it's a blur because there's so many different things that happen. So in college, it was actually music that started giving me the confidence. It was like a random college party in which me and my friend he put on a beat and then at a party, and then he's like, "Yo, Shibu, just freestyle over this, right?" And then I started freestyling, and he saw something there. It wasn't like a great freestyle, but he saw like talent there. He's like, "Yo, you could like if you work on your craft, you can actually be an MC too." And so that gave me the confidence to pursue the hip hop leg of my artistry. And then I started to realize, I can make a lane for myself. You don't hear about any big, well, at the time, you didn't hear about any big brown artists in mainstream US. Now you got more and more acts coming up, right? You got Hanuman Kind, and you got the Toronto scene, the UK scene. But like at that time, it was like there was like nobody. So I'm like, maybe I could start to create a new lane for that, or be part of a new lane that could emerge. So that's when I started that's when the music thing kind of like unlocked that door for me, right? It was the key. And then it gave me the confidence to be a full fledged artist because I realized if I can do that, then why not tap into my initial love of cinema, right? And I started creating some short films on YouTube, and I realized, what, I'm a good writer, right? This is my strength. I can write really good stories in my raps, and I can write really good like scripts in my YouTube skits, whether they're just funny like senseless skits or whether they're like serious dramas. I did both on YouTube, so that's kind of what propelled me to where I am right now, right? Trying to pursue this full time and trying to keep at the grind.
Totally. And yeah, by no means was I skipping over the process, but no, I think that's cool to hear. With that, I was going to ask, I think typically, like a lot of folks, when it comes to the music, they say it's usually, most of it comes from their thoughts or like their journey. Like, usually like a lot of folks like Eminem and even other artists, they'll like take stories that are happening in their real life or have happened and that comes out in the music. So I'm curious from your perspective, is there a balance where it's like you usually are really reflective when you're creating music, or is it sometimes it's just these wild dreams and just wild, just abstract thoughts that you've been sitting on for a while, you want to just bring to life there?
Well, I think those abstract thoughts and things that have been lingering in my head are a direct product of the things that happened introspectively to me, right? So I think it's actually a fusion of both those things you mentioned because I'm a very introspective artist, right? Most of the stuff that I rap about comes from real life experiences and a lot of pain. It comes from the pain more than the joy. That's when I delve like really deep into my pen game is when I reach into that pain, a lot of pain points that I had growing up, whether it's being a soup boy, being rejected by girls, whether it's not being accepted as one of the cool kids and being bullied, and being ridiculed just for the way I looked or the way I sounded. All those things, right? Those led to me having a lot of thoughts, especially when I was younger. Just being by myself a lot, having those thoughts kind of linger in my head. And so the rap game, the whole movie making aspirations, they've been like a phenomenal outlet for me to finally like unleash a lot of those thoughts into something else. So it's a little healthier than just keeping it all in here.
Absolutely. And so, no, I love the process. I love just the mindset when it comes to creating music. And I guess, leading up to that official debut, right, whether it's mixtape or album that you've dropped, your first one, what was the emotions like when you first, like, published it? Where it was like, it was available for the world to consume. Like, what were the emotions you were going through at that point?
The emotions I was going through, well, one, it was like a huge relief because it felt like a lot of things that I wanted to share with the world that I don't necessarily share with because I'm fairly a private person with my personal life. I got to share in that album, right? and I got to share in that debut album through like little instances, little pockets, and little layers of emotion that have been lingering with me for forever. So I had a huge burden lifted off my shoulders in terms of my emotional mental health. I was able to just have a cathartic feeling, just releasing that into the songs because there's so much pain. Like that first album, bro, that was like the epitome of like the soup boy journey, right? We going getting rejected and like getting heartbroken and then getting like neglected. Everything was encapsulated in that album. And then there's also like joyous moments and like moments of like just that puppy love, right? When you're excited for love and when you're having some moments of complete bliss. There's moments of that too. So it was like a complete roller coaster of love, and I wanted to focus specifically on that. And so it was a huge relief, and it was just the first album, right? I knew that there's a lot more coming, a lot more work that's going to be more refined and a lot more distinguished as an artist and more polished. But just to get that out there into the world where people could tune in and actually listen to me. I had like people that I haven't talked to in years reach out to me and saying, "Yo, bro, you all right, man? Like you, like I just want to reach out and say it gets better, bro. Don't worry." I'm like, I'm good, bro. This is just me as an artist. I'm just unleashing things that I've had forever. Like I'm not like super depressed at the moment. So it was good. I think it had a among the very limited people that did listen to it. I think it had a good overall, pretty good impact.
That's awesome, man. I think to echo on that, man. I think just day to day life, man. I like I'm all for the upbeat, like pump up music. It's great, but dude, it's just that's not real. Like I think the day there's more days where stuff is real, and you're like, damn. And I think people hearing, I mean, there's a balance. So you obviously don't want to just consume content that's going to bring you down, but also sometimes you just want to feel like I'm not the only human going through this. So I love that you've chosen to be vulnerable in your art.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, some of my favorite artists have been super vulnerable, right? So I think it stems from that too. And also, that definitely plays a huge role in shaping my music too.
Yeah, man, and just building on that. I know we talked about there's that worry, just like there's that level of anxious, right? So when you put a project out, what's the reaction? So I guess leading up to this point, when did you break it to your parents that like, hey, I'm not necessarily going full time in this, but this is something I'm actually doing. I really want to pursue in terms of music. What was the reaction from like friends to, I guess, what was that initial like, hey, like, I dropped it. This is what I'm working on. What's your thoughts? Were you scared? Were you excited? Or you were like, I just want to hear what they have to say and like, I can move on from it.
So I have a couple of key defining moments, right, in which that happened. Because obviously my family, they play a huge role in the real estate of my mind, right? So that's a huge hurdle to cross as a Tamil kid, right? Uh, the first moment was my uncle in Chicago. He told me very early on. This is like my freshman year of college. Like you should get into film. He's like, do you want to do like because you seem to be into movies a lot. You seem to want to incline to make movies. You made some movies in high school. You should look into getting into film too. And that was for me revolutionary because I've never heard any Indian parent at that level, freshman in college, say something like that. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't like telling me I should go down the IT path, or he wasn't telling me I should go down the finance path. Even he told me I should legit consider doing that. Obviously, I didn't end up doing that because I wasn't allowed to. Because my immediate parents, they wanted me to, or my father wanted me to focus on something that could pay the bills more quickly, right? But that was a key moment that gave me the confidence in the back of my head. Another moment was when I finished my bachelor's. I finished studying business and I got my first job. And then my father hit me up and said, "So we gotta start applying for your master's." He kept bothering me about doing my master's. Me, right? I'm just gonna say this, dude. I am just not a school smart kid. I'm like when it comes to school smarts, I am very, very low IQ when it comes to books, right? I'm just not a good student. I never was. And so when I finished my bachelor's, I gnawed my way out. I went through the trenches just to graduate with my bachelor's degree, bro. So once I did that, I was like, I'm fucking done with school forever. I don't want to see another pencil in my life again unless I'm writing on a notepad something for my art, right? So when my dad kept pestering me about my master's, I had to tell him, right? The conversation. I had to tell him I don't want to do my master's because I don't want to pursue that. And then when he asked me why, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to add on to your education? I had to tell him I'm pursuing a life as an artist. I don't want to do the corporate stuff forever. I can do it to pay my bills. I can do it to save money, but I'm ultimately doing it to fuel my passion. I'm doing it to fund my ambitions. And doing my master's is going to be very counterproductive because that's going to take all my time. And it was one of the hardest things I had to say to my father because it felt like I was spitting in his face because up until now, he had no idea that I wanted to be serious about this stuff. He knew I was interested, but he didn't realize how serious I was about it. So it took him a while to accept that. Yeah, that was one of the things that was very defining for me. And my friends, they were always supportive from the beginning. They always knew I had some hidden talents here and there that they saw glimpses of. So they were all fairly supportive.
Man, props to you, man. That is a Hall of Fame level difficult conversation to have growing up as a double kid where you're like, yo, education beyond this point is not for me. And I think, specifically within our culture, obviously I think it's known that double dads and sons are always butt heads. I have yet to find one where there's no level of friction. For you to stand on business, man, and really say, look, this is my vision. This is what I'm going to stand on and go full throttle. That's dope. A lot of people will have those same thoughts and ideas, but they will succumb to, whether it's family pressure, societal pressure, and just like, they'll just stay in their brain and they never act on it. So
yeah, for sure.
I think with them, I think it's been cool. I mean, even seeing you, like, the time I know you, man, the progression's been dope. I think for me, one of the most dope moments was to see you film your music video in front of Madison Square Garden. And then, obviously, like, to see you, like, cook up with our other homie, Praveen. I think that's dope, man. I think it's important to have great friends, but I think when you can share, like, your creative passions with people that you're cool with, I think that's just cloud nine in my eyes. Like, talk to me about, those two moments there.
Yeah, bro. So I gotta talk about Praveen first because I linked with him first, right? He was one of the guys that I could immediately just see myself on the same page. We were on the same wavelengths, everything, right? We had the same passions because he also wanted to do the acting thing first, and then he wanted to be in the movie maker mindset. So we had just on that same foundation, we were already connected. And then maybe he's really just a younger version of me in that aspect, right? And then he also, obviously great singer, right? Amazing, beautiful voice. So he took me on as my Tumbi and started calling me Anna very early on. I'm like, great. I'm glad like I have the little brother in music or in the arts that I never had. You know what I mean? So it was just good to have a little bro. Even though there's so much that I'm actually learning from him, it was good to be that like figure in his life, that support piece, when it comes to just being like mentally there for him, to try to help push him, because I know he's like super ultra talented, right? So I just loved making music with him. I knew I had to get involved with him right off the bat as soon as Rahul, our boy, introduced.
Hey.
The ultimate, that by the way, also side note, Rahul, the ultimate connector, ultimate hype man connecting piece. That was a great find, you know, down the line when me and Praveen, when we start getting more established as artists and established as a duo, we got to give a shout out to Rahul for making that happen. But yeah, I just thought right off the bat I had to do something with him, and we did, man. We did. We have a couple songs out, a few songs actually, and some people say that's some of my best work, right? Some of my best like rap verses they've seen it with him, and I think just me and him when we go into a studio together, we really want to like subconsciously just bring out the best in each other, right? Or consciously and intentionally, because we're there and we're like, yeah, well, let's not just hone it in. Let's actually like make actual magic, right? So we both have that same mentality. And yeah, man, the Madison Square Garden video. I'm glad you brought that up, bro, dude. I that's the first time I've ever worn a wasty in my life, and let me tell you, I've never been empowered. Like that was the most empowering thing ever in front of MSG too. So it was just so much like just a lot of iconic feelings that I've had. It's like, yeah, I'm rapping in New York City, and I'm rapping in front of Madison Square Garden, and I'm rapping in Tamil in front of Madison Square Garden in a veshti. So it was just such a dope, epic moment for me to capture that. And, yeah, man, it was good. I never thought I would be able to rap in a veshti that confident, and especially being that first time wearing something like that. It's a vulnerable thing to wear, you know what I mean? You're like, oh man, I don't want like the slip to open up at a wrong point. But the moment I wore that, I was like, nah, man, I'm owning the fit, bro. This is the fit, So it was good, man. Very empowering feeling, Never felt more empowered.
That's amazing, man. Again, humble brother to another, man. It was dope to see. Yeah, I think, we highlighted it briefly a little bit about, I think, it's great to see more brown representation right across the board, but there's still, even within brown culture, man, there's so many different kinds of brown people, which is dope. But I think even then there's still, I think, an opportunity for more talented Tamil folks like yourself, man, to break through and show like, hey, like, we really do this. Now we could do the corporate life, but we also have creative passions that we want to see through.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, just on that, man. What do you feel like is the state of just like culture in terms of like Tamil culture, right? I think growing up, man, we were taught there's a certain persona, a certain way you can represent your culture, but I always just felt like, you don't want everyone to feel like you're boxed in. And I think there's so many ways to show that, hey, I'm proud of my Tamil identity and my heritage, and this is how I show it. So I guess how do you feel like that's progressed broadly? And like, how do you feel like you continue to push that envelope in your music and just your day to day?
Yeah, I think there's no clear line to walk on in terms of owning your Tamil heritage versus being your own artist, right? They're both the same thing, right? Your Tamil heritage is what defines you as an artist. So it's the same, more clear cut path. Then there's the other side where, Tamil heritage is not something that may be instilled in you, right? It just happens to be your skin tone, and your artistry is something completely different, right? It's talking about stuff that maybe more black kids go through, right? Or maybe more white kids go through. Then so you relate more to that demographic than your Tamil heritage necessarily, right? So there's like the two sides, and then there's like the line in between, right, where you have both aspects. So for me, I have always strived to be an artist who happens to be a Tamil guy who happens to grow up in Japan, right? That obviously those cultures, they make me who I am. They made me who I am. They molded me, and also being an American now, right? Being an American citizen, that also molded me. But for me, I use them more as shoulder pads and things of like support that lift me up into who I am, as opposed to completely just making that whole thing my persona, right? Because like you mentioned about being boxed in, right? I don't want to be known as a really dope Tamil rapper or a really dope rapper out of Kobe, right? I want to be known as just a dope rapper or a dope artist or a guy who's pushing good stories forward, who happens to be Tamil, who happens to be out of Kobe from Japan, who happens to live in New York City. You know what I'm saying? That's why I want those things to be lifting me up, but not completely masking who I am as an artist. Me as an artist, that's what I want to be as the forefront of my my craft, as opposed to just those uh, cultural background. Those are important. Those things help boost me up, and they definitely made me who I am. I do. I try to walk the line to make sure it doesn't completely take over my not just my art, but my personality. Right? Because my personality, I feel like, is a lot more than just what I look like or where I'm from. So it's not always perfect. Sometimes I tap into the tunnel side that happened to my American like rebellion side, and sometimes I go a little too far into the Japanese harmonizing and things like that. But that's what I am, bro. And I'm not like a line walker, right? And I think that's what makes me who I am. So yeah,
Absolutely, man. We're never gonna be perfect. I think life is. I'm not a philosopher, but I think life is about pursuing constant evolution and growth on our time here. So I think again, want to be mindful of your time, man. Last two questions for you on our show today. I think one, what does Shibu have cooking up for the rest of 2025? I think the fans are curious to know what else is coming up. We got another epic music video coming up. We got some more under the radar collabs coming out. What do we have going on?
bro. So I got a bunch of collabs on the way. I got a bunch of songs coming out, solo songs. This year, I'm really focusing on expanding my current base, expanding my circle, and really like tapping into them, and then expanding my craft. So collabs with other artists, and then like also like solo songs. I'm not really doing a big album at this point because I want to connect, like I said, more into my circle, right, and really be giving them the one-on-one experience. So instead of giving them a huge album to absorb, I want to take a step back from that, and then be like, okay, this is a song that talks about this. This is a song that talks about that. I want to really tap into who I am as an artist, and it's not defined by one theme of an album, right? It's defined by different songs. So I'm gonna be releasing a lot of songs this year, man. I got a lot in the vault already. I got a song coming out soon in a couple of weeks called "The Nothing Man." That's really gonna tap into my self-deprecating, my like kind of like low key sad boy kind of stuff, and like you'll really see my influences there. My influence. I'm like a huge Eminem fan, Childish Gambino fan, and so you're gonna see a lot of that, like their elements, in that song. So I'm excited for the Nothing Man coming out soon, and then yeah, man. Like I said, a lot of collabs. I don't want to reveal the names yet, because it's supposed to be somewhat of a surprise as I announce some of these people. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited just bring that out there and put it out there.
We're all looking forward to it, man. And I think, too, I always love to wrap it up with this question is, one, Shibu, I think it's great to see the progression, man. I think from the time I've known you, I think back to the pandemic days where I think we met on Clubhouse, which is crazy. It's been 4 years now. But, when it's all said and done, man, I think when you think about your music and the impact and potential legacy you want to have as a creative, right? Not just as an artist, but eventually, someone who produces more content, like, what do you want people to resonate and think of when they think of Shibu long term?
So I want them to look at my art, whether it's the films, whether it's the music, and whether it's the comedy, which is a whole other aspect I'm tapping into. I want them to look at my work and I want them to tell themselves, hey, this guy can tap into all these different stories, right? That stem from who he is. I want to be able to share my story or share stories that I've come across in the way that I want to do it, in the way that it's supposed to be told, not the way that it was, I guess, formatted to be told in all these years in entertainment. I want people to be able to create their own paths. Not necessarily everyone has to be an artist, but I want people to look at my work and say, this guy spoke his mind. He's full of stories. I want that. I want that to be some kind of inspiration for them to really unleash that part of their mind in which they can just be themselves. Whether it's just being a writer, whether it's being an architect, right? Whatever you're creating, I want your story to be infused with that project, whatever that project is, and not just do things based off of one format. Try to forge a new path, because ultimately I am trying to create a new path as an artist with my artistry, and so I want people to be able to create their own different pathways. That's what I want them to get from listening to my.
That's amazing, brother. And with that, man, that's it for this segment. We'll be sure to have Shibu on and do more creative collabs in the future, but appreciate the time, brother. We'll be sure to drop all your links in the bottom of the channel so people can tap in with you and just keep on crushing it, man. We love today's conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Adi, for an awesome time catching up with you and just having a good conversation, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. With that, folks, we're signing off from today's AU episode.